Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. This week's guest is Noah Droddy. Noah is a professional runner living in Boulder, Colorado, alongside about half of the guests that have been on this podcast. Noah is a self-described blue-collar runner, humble yet motivated to chase fast times out on the roads and perhaps eventually even on the trails. In this episode, we talked about his training over the last few years as a pro, as well as his training leading up to the 2019 Chicago Marathon. We talked about a friendly bet he made with Jim Walmsley at the start of the Houston Half Marathon, which led to a discussion about future 100-mile plans. This was another fun one with plenty of fan and girlfriend submitted questions. I hope you enjoy. Cool. So I am here in Boulder, Colorado with Noah Droddy. Noah, thanks for joining today. I'm glad your dog was able to get his business done, or her business done too.
Yeah, my pleasure. Sorry I'm late, but we made it and my dog is satisfied.
Perfect. That's really the most important thing in life.
It is. Happy dog, happy life.
Exactly. So we're here in Boulder, Colorado. You've lived here for 4 years. Mm-hmm. Let's kick things off with a question that generally stumps most people. Who are you?
Oh, God. I don't know. No one really knows who they are because it's a constant evolution, right?
Yep.
I mean, in terms of just my Twitter byline, I'm a professional athlete,
right?
Stay-at-home dog dad, boyfriend, son, friend, all those things. Any more intricate than that, I guess it kind of depends on the day. But I think I'm a pretty simple man, just trying to get better at the thing I'm passionate about, and generally finding my way.
Cool. That's a good answer. So you're a professional runner living here in Boulder, Colorado. Mm-hmm. I feel like I was swiping through some of the dating apps while I was here, and you're kind of like an oddball if you don't list runner, hiker, CrossFitter, all this stuff.
Yeah.
What's it like being in an environment where everyone is so active and so fit, and you walk down the street and everyone looks like a pro athlete because they are?
Yeah, it's mind blowing for me still now, 4 years in. I come from Indiana. And I was a runner in Indiana, obviously, and eventually I decided that I needed to, I decided that running was the thing I was passionate about, and my life was directionless, and I was like, well, maybe I could get better at running. So I was like, where do I go to get better at running? And, Boulder ended up being, the spot that I went out to. And yeah, in Indiana, it's like, you maybe see one or two other people out running, but it's like I went out running here and I was like, oh my God, it's not only are there so many, recreational and hobbyist athletes out there, but the density of professional athletes, both active and retired, is insane. I mean, it's just, the pool is so deep here, which is incredibly motivating. I mean, just in my first, few months, I was meeting Olympians and former world record holders, current world record holders, all kinds of stuff. So as a fan of the sport, beyond just a participant in the sport, it's been a real trip for me.
Cool. A friend of yours, Matt Daniels, has coined the term, or somebody else coined it, Boulder Average, having a shoe sponsor.
Yeah.
What's it like being in that environment where, he's like, I can run a sub 4 minute mile, but who cares? So can 50 people within, 2 miles of here. What's it like being an athlete of your caliber and being surrounded by such greatness?
For me, it's really cool and really motivating. And now, I'll turn 29 soon. I almost consider myself an older athlete here. And so it's cool to have people older than me, and then a good crop of younger athletes too, that we can all just, I feel like it's kind of, if you're in tech, it's like being in the Silicon Valley,
right.
Kind of you meet up and everyone's trading ideas and trading workouts, and there's something special about going somewhere and everyone understands what it is you do. You can skip that whole phase of
Right.
explaining to somebody, oh, I'm a
Oh, I
runner.
run. Yeah.
So yeah, there's a whole lot of benefits to that. There's some drawbacks, like sometimes you just want to go and have a drink and not talk about running, or you want to go somewhere and not think about running. And that's harder to do here. So
Right.
you have to be a little bit better about compartmentalizing your life. But the benefits, I would say, drastically outweigh those negatives.
Makes sense. So I know I preempted this by saying we're not going to look backwards, but let's look backwards for a second. Why did you go for your first run?
Well, I was, I was kind of the kid who played all the sports growing up. And then, my dad had been a runner, in high school and college, a pretty good one, and continued running, until I was young and then kind of stopped. But yeah, I was like, okay, I'll go out for high school cross country. And I was like, if I can make it around the parkway behind my house, that's probably like a pretty good indicator. The parkway is maybe a mile around. And I remember like going out for a jog with my dad and one of my friends. And by the time we got back to the house, I like collapsed in the yard and I was like done, and so I was like, well, I should probably be able to do that before I show up for cross country practice. And so that, cross country was just like another thing to try, really. I still ended up playing basketball and other things. So I guess I just went for that first run to see
Just
what it
see
was
it.
about.
Yeah. So why'd you, I guess more importantly then, why'd you go for the second one?
I guess it was kind of the same thing for all the sports I did. It's like once I committed to doing it, like that's what I did,
Right.
And I didn't necessarily commit to doing it as well as I could. I wasn't the kind of kid who was a perfectionist in everything I did, but once I like signed up for the sport, like, I was going to see it through to the end of the season. And so like my second run was probably the first day of practice. I don't know, but I did the second run because I was at practice. I wasn't super motivated and running didn't really mean anything to me at that point. It was just like, well, I'm on the team and the team runs. And so I'm going to go for a run.
Cool.
Yeah.
So fast forward a few years and you have found yourself at the Olympic trials. And that was a 10K, right?
Yeah. Well, more than a few years.
A couple of years.
Yeah, probably, almost 10 years, 8 to 10 years. But, I ran the trials and the marathon first. But yes, I also made the track.
What was that environment like?
At the track 10K?
Yeah.
Well, that was a pretty unreal experience for me. I was a fan of the sport. I knew the historical significance of Hayward. I loved watching Olympic trials races, as a fan. And a year before that race, I had bought tickets to go as a spectator. I bought tickets for myself and my dad, and that's before I ever had dreams of like pursuing a spot on the line. And so to be there was very surreal. It was, making the decision to move to Boulder and become a runner paid off way quicker in a much bigger way than I had ever imagined. I never expected to be there as an athlete. And so, yeah, that experience was totally surreal. I didn't have the emotional depth to really like appreciate it at the time. And so looking back on it now, I'm like, holy shit, kid. Am I allowed to curse on this?
Yeah.
I was like,
you say whatever you want.
I was like, holy shit, man. Like, you're at the Olympic trials.
Yeah.
My parents are up there. Like, I'm lining up next to the best runners in the country. Like, it was an overload for sure, but an experience that I'll remember forever.
So you said you never expected to be there, yet it was still the goal. So how do you balance like having, I don't want to say unrealistic goals, but like goals that are that seem unattainable in the moment with putting in the work to actually make that happen? Because like you were working to get there, right? It wasn't just like you happened to be invited. It was, you have to put in the work to get there.
Yeah, I qualified.
Right.
I would say getting to the Olympic track trials was not an explicit goal of mine. I would say that was kind of a happy accident as a byproduct of my other goal, which was just to get better at running, which is why I moved here. And so, I wasn't like a sponsored athlete or anything. I was just kind of a guy trying to get better. And it just so happened that in one of those races where I was trying to get better, I ran faster than I thought I could. And that time ended up
getting you there,
getting me to the trials. And so, yeah, the trials that's a bigger goal than I would have ever set for myself, but it happened as a byproduct of my first and only goal, which was just to improve,
just getting better. So what seems to be, so a lot of the guests on this podcast are pro and elite athletes that have had a lot of success or some success or something in between. And a sentiment that keeps coming up is they're never focused on a tangible goal. They're focused on a quantitative goal. They're focused on a qualitative goal, which is getting better over time and enjoying the process and putting in the little bricks to build the house. How do you balance training for something like the Chicago Marathon or the Olympic trials or whatever it might be with a goalposts that aren't continually moving forward? So like how do you put it in perspective with training for something big that you want to crush with trusting the long-term approach?
Yeah, I think it's almost been a little easier for me because I don't come from a background of elite performance. Like I never made the state meet in high school. Mm-hmm. Went to a Division III college. I was never a national champion. And so, I never really had to cope with like intense expectations mm-hmm. or intense performance goals, I guess. My goal was always just to continue to improve. And when I made the decision to move out here, that was the only goal. And then now fast forward a few years, like I've been really fortunate that goal paid off. And now I do this for work and I'm a professional athlete. And so my goals do become more tangible. I have a goal of what I want to run at Chicago. A lot of times the goals are superimposed on us because we have to hit certain right. standards, but I see those things as within my capabilities. And so once you acknowledge that those standards are within your capabilities, then you're really back at the original goal, which is just to continue to better. Fulfill your potential. And so sometimes it's easy to lose sight of like fulfilling your potential and focus only on the number or focus only on the placing. And I found that is not a good headspace for me. And I've been sucked into that trap before. And so now I feel like I'm back in a spot in my career where I can just be like, okay, Noah, all Noah has to do is be a better Noah. Like Noah doesn't have to be Galen Rupp.
Right.
And so that's been working for me.
Yeah. I think that's the characteristic of like sustainable progress. And it's not, I had Peter Bromka on the podcast mm-hmm. a couple of months ago before Boston, and he was talking about how people come to him and they're like, I want to BQ in a year. And it's like, you can't have these unrealistic time goals that are imposed by somebody else. You have to train within yourself. And like, personally, I wanted to BQ 4 years ago, and I said, my 5K time was, good. And I said, I can, train hard and do it. Well, fast forward 4 years and I finally did after 4 attempts. And all the time people are, one of the things that he was talking about was, he never understood the difficulty of a BQ until he set his goal as the OTQ, mm-hmm. because it's not your goal. It's somebody else's goal for you to achieve something else. So it's interesting that you highlighted that, you have goals for Chicago, but they're part of that longer process.
Yeah, it's more about like, where do I see my potential?
Right.
And I think that number is attainable in Chicago. And does that fit nicely in the goal of like achieving the Olympic standard? Yeah, those goals happen to coincide. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky that the high end of my fitness, I think, overlaps with some of those standards. But at the same time, if I go out there and I just improve, in my last marathon, I didn't improve, between marathon 1 and 2, I got right. worse, and so if I can just go to marathon 3
right.
and finish
another step up,
1,
yeah,
it's like, can I be upset that I'm the best that I've ever been?
Right. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. So what are you thinking about on the start line?
Not much. By the time I get to the start line, it's just like, I just need to relax,
yeah.
Especially in the marathon. I think in some of the shorter races, you try to like hype yourself up because the action is so intense from the beginning.
Right.
And the marathon, I really shouldn't be working hard for another hour.
Right.
And so it's really just about staying calm, and any of the thinking and reflecting I've done have really happened in the days leading up to it. And so I think when I step to the start line, it's just having a calm mind and knowing that it's about to hurt a lot, and just being willing to like lean into that and pursue that. And so, yeah, and I'm not blasting music before and hyping myself up, because that's not a good use of my energy.
Right. Maybe for a mile or a 5K.
For sure. But in the long races, if I'm prepared, the preparation is done.
Right.
All I can do is go out according to my plan.
Cool. So you just raced Philly. It was hot and humid, and you fought hard, and you worked real hard at the end of it. Where does your head go? You ran what, 63 and change?
Yeah, 63 mid. Yeah.
So where does your head go at, minute 50, knowing that like these next 10 to 15 minutes are going to hurt a lot?
Yeah, I think honestly by minute 50, I'm in a better headspace than I am at minute 10. Because like honestly in a race like that where the conditions were so tough.
Right. And you're already 2 miles in at mile 10.
Yeah. And I was hurting.
Minute 10.
Yeah, I was hurting bad.
Right.
And so the finish line seems so unobtainable.
Right.
When you're 2 miles in to a half and hurting so bad.
Right.
That by the time I've gotten to mile 10 or 11, the finish line is all of a sudden within
attainable.
sight. And I don't want to give up now, because if I give up now, then all the pain that I just went through is really all for naught.
Yep.
And so it's much easier to push myself at that place. And for me as an athlete, getting through the beginning stages of a race are always like mentally way harder, because by the time I get to minute 50, I'm committed. Like I'm all in already. Yep. It's like
you've showed your hand, and
yeah,
you're in. Yeah.
It's like, well, I got to push myself all the way.
Right.
At this point.
Okay. So 10 to 30, minute 10 to 30, what are you thinking about?
It's not good. It's like I wish I could tell you that I had some mantra and I was like rock solid but in those minutes I was really just like, man, this is way harder than it should be. This is way harder than I expected. Like, I know we passed the start line at mile 5. Like, that would be a good place to drop out. Or should I not drop out and just dial the effort back and call it a good workout? Like, I'm looking for ways to give myself an out almost every time, but especially when the conditions are bad. Like, I'm just fighting the urge to quit. And that's my least favorite part of the sport, because that's such a bad place to be in, and it's so easy to let that spiral.
So why didn't you?
I don't know, because I know how badly I would hate myself if I did that, because I've done that before. In my career, I've quit when looking back on it, I'm just like, man,
I could have just hurt for a few.
Yeah. It's like, why did I just quit there? Like, that was just like a stupid thing to do.
Right.
And now I'm going to be thinking about this for a year, so I think I've kind of learned that lesson, where it's like, if I'm hurting and looking for an out at mile 3, it's almost, I can see that as normal,
right? And
like recognize that my thoughts are spiraling, and I can just like,
you said lean into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just keep going, and sometimes I'll just say out loud, like, you're fine.
Yeah.
Like, you're fine. And I'm like, people, my competitors probably think I'm a little nuts, 'cause I'm like talking to myself out loud. Yeah. And then I just know, I try to put it into minutes instead of miles, because miles can seem daunting sometimes. And so I'm just like, okay, if I can suffer through this headspace for 20 more minutes, I'll start feeling competitive, and then that will carry me through the finish.
Cool. So you just said miles can seem daunting. We were talking before the podcast about running 100 miles, and you said you had a bet with Jim. Is that something you can share publicly?
Yeah. So I guess for context, at the Houston half, he was going for the Olympic trial standard.
This is Jim Walmsley.
And that was kind of a big deal. Everyone wanted to see if the ultra guy could step down and run with the road guys. And so I was like, man, that's really cool. Like, how he can cross over. I mean, let's be honest, they're two different sports. Like, how he can cross over the two sports. And so just in the tent before that, I was like, hey man, if you I can't remember if I said if you beat me or if you run under 63 minutes. It was one of those two. I was like, I'll run a 100-mile race within a year from here.
Wow.
And it was kind of a joke, but also like if he would have done it, I don't know. I probably would have like had to stay true to my word in some way. But it was kind of a joke because I admire him a lot. But if he beat me, that would have been a big upset because the road is my domain.
Right.
But anyway, and I guess there is a part of me that wants to do that anyway, but that would have bumped the timeline up by a lot.
So let's talk about that. So Jim has been pretty outspoken about how insanely difficult 100-milers are. And he's made some comments about, some of the Africans running, come into the canyon and let's do 50 miles and, I'll kick your ass, basically. And I think he's totally right that it's a completely different sport. You need completely different strengths. And it's a completely different headspace, willing to suffer for 2 hours versus willing to suffer for 5 to 30 hours. So right now you're running track and road and half marathons and marathons. That's a max of no more than 3 hours if you have a very bad day in the marathon. What is it about the 100-miler that Jim ran 14 and change, and that was a record at Western States? Mm-hmm. What is it about the 100-mile distance that I guess intrigues you or interests you?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be an entirely new experience, and I think an entirely new way of testing myself, and those like negative thought spirals I was talking about that happen in the first 10-20 minutes of my race. Can I deal with that?
10 to 20 miles.
Yeah, can I deal with that for hours?
Right.
I don't know. And so I think a lot of why we run is to learn about ourselves and to test ourselves. And at this point, I've done that in every distance in my domain.
Right.
And so the ultras are kind of the next frontier. And I'm definitely not saying right now that I'm going to be doing an ultra
next year
during my pro career.
Mm-hmm.
My pro career is up to the marathon, and that's it. But I do have a lot of respect for that world. And I'm also a cycling fan. If I can go on a tangent here for a second, there's a team called EF Education First, and they have a rider named Lachlan Morton, who I think lives in Boulder. But anyway, they have been allowing him, instead of pursuing just the World Tour circuit, to now go and do some rides. Like he just rode the Colorado Trail, and he did the Leadville 100. And so to listen to him, this World Tour rider, talk about how he's learning so much about himself pursuing these alternative races has been super inspiring for me. Because it's like, yeah, do I know how I react at the high end of racing in my domain? Sure. But I don't know anything about myself.
Where's your limit? Yeah,
exactly. So down the road, I think that's
pun intended.
Yeah. I think that'd be something cool for me to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the lessons you learn, as you said, in the longer stuff, whether it's a half marathon, 50K, 50 mile, whatever, it trickles down. So like I said, I was chasing that PQ for years, and I decided to switch to trail running for a stretch of time, and I ran a 50K, and a 50K run and training put the marathon training in perspective. I was doing 4.5-hour runs, which made, when I got back into a marathon cycle, a 2-hour run seemed like, oh, it's only 2 hours. Yeah. Sick. And then the hurt of, mile 21 was nothing like the hurt of like hour 6. And I think that, obviously I'm in a different place because I don't have to perform for my job, and I can take these risks and, do that. But anyone's, able to take risks and try something new. I think it's really interesting to totally shake it up sometimes and see what you can learn from something so humbling. Yeah. That'll kick your ass.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even find that just like in marathon training compared to
the half,
half and 10K. I mean, yeah, your scope of relativity just changes so much. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm a 2-hour race compared to a 1-hour race, like let's talk 16 hours,
right?
2 hours. Like I feel like it multiplies.
Yeah. Well, that's super cool. So what's your favorite distance?
My favorite distance is probably the half right now. I've definitely had my most success over 10K and half, but I do love something about just like running really hard for about an hour, and you know how there's the range of emotions you can feel there. But really, my heart lies in becoming a successful marathoner. I've had a couple bad experiences now, and so I'm still waiting to like finish that marathon where I'm like, okay, that went
That
well.
was well executed.
Yeah, my preparation showed itself. And so I think once I finally break through there, like hopefully it's this October, who knows? I think, you know, I want to be a marathoner. That's what I want to be.
Cool. What do you think it is about the marathon? You think it's the challenge that like you can only do it a couple times a year?
Yeah, it's high stakes. You know, you pour so much, and you can only race twice a year.
Right.
There's no guarantee you're even going to get to the start line healthy.
Right.
And one thing I've learned about elite marathoning, and probably marathoning at every level, you can have great preparation and it could just not happen.
Right.
Or you could have poor preparation and you pull off a miracle. You know, it's just like there's nothing guaranteed in the marathon, but it is an exercise in patience and tenacity and focus, and a lot of qualities that you use in the shorter distances, but just not to the same extent. And so it really felt like, you know, just coming to the marathon in the last year or two, a unique challenge, a new thing for me to do. And yeah, kind of like a new sport almost.
Cool. Do you have like a benchmark workout that you go to in a longer build? Or in a build for a longer race?
Yeah, not super specifically, because now this will be my third marathon build up and they've all been fairly different. But I think using the long run as more of a workout instead of more just like long, slow miles is important. And so just for like the data people, I guess, a couple weeks ago, we did a workout that was like 6 miles warming up, and then 8 miles at 6-minute pace, and then 8 miles at 5-minute pace. And then a cool down. So it turned out to be a 23-mile day. So a pretty good long run, but in there, you know, from miles like, you know, 14 or 12 to 20, like I'm running really hard.
Right.
And so if I can run my 20th mile in 5 minutes in training, you know, like hopefully come race day, that sensation is a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And so those are the kind of workouts that give me a lot of confidence. They're not necessarily my favorite thing to do always, but I think they're a necessity when you start talking about like long distance races.
Yeah. What are you doing the day after a long run like that?
Staring at the wall, putting myself back together. I mean, I'll still usually run twice, but they're short and slow by my standards. And, you know, generally I just feel so drained that I'm just like trying to relax. I have the luxury of being a professional athlete now, and I don't have to go to work anymore. And so that's huge. I can just kind of recover, but, yeah, nothing sexy. I mean, I'm just trying to get my levels back up, I guess.
Yep. So one thing that I think is important for amateurs to hear is just how slow people like you go compared to your race pace on these easy days. So your marathon pace is what in the...
I mean, ideally it'll be around 5 minutes.
So what's your easy pace or recovery pace?
It's whatever I need to feel recovered, to be honest. And so I'm never shooting for a number.
Right. But I think that piece is important to highlight as well. But what does that number look like? Is it a 7? Is it an 8?
Well, today, I ran 10 miles easy this morning, coming off the race 2 days ago. And my first mile was like 8:15.
Nice. And
so by the end of the run, you know, I'm probably running more like 7:15. Mm-hmm. So like a 7:30 average over the whole thing. I think it'd be really rare for me to run much under 7-minute pace.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and a lot of I think amateurs are in that gray zone of, you know, they're running their easy days at 7:15 to 7:30, and that's too fast.
Yeah, it's like you get better on your hard days,
right?
And so if you're coming into your hard days not fully recovered, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
You're not getting better on your easy days. You're just right. Getting ready for your next hard day. And so like a lot of times I'll go out on loops that I know the distance, mm-hmm. and I just won't wear a watch at all. Yeah. So like I have an 8-mile loop and I'll just go run it and I'll have no idea what I just ran. for the loop. I don't look at the time when I
Just
leave.
all effort. Yeah.
There's no time at all. I just barely jog the first mile, get into a rhythm, and eventually it's done, and I know how far I ran.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I think that's a really good recipe for success and for continuing to improve. I ran with Matt Daniels this morning, and he's a sub 4 miler. He was 4th at Western State, so safe to say he's like pretty fit. And I felt like nervous about running with him because obviously I'm nowhere near that level. And he was like, "You lead, do whatever you want. I got a big workout tomorrow. I'll run as slow as you want." And I think that approach is like the demarcation between easy and hard. The bigger that gap can be, the more impact you can have, and the more you can improve.
Yeah, I mean, I never feel like there's a mile wasted. Whether I run at 8:30 pace or a 5-minute pace, I'm like, the 5-minute pace mile is going to get me a little more race ready, but like. 8:30 miles a mile I ran,
right.
I'm counting it.
Definitely. All right. So we have a handful of fan and family and training partner submitted questions. So buckle up. This is gonna get good. So the first one, I think who may have asked this, but how do you handle the intense pressures of being a professional athlete and a first-class stay-at-home dog dad?
Yeah, I mean, it is immense pressure. Obviously I have to get my work done, but then there's this creature at home, like depending on me to take her out.
That's not a nice way to talk.
Take her outside 3 times a day. And so it's a big responsibility.
Is your girlfriend?
You obviously want to raise a dog that is, a respected member of the community and a global citizen.
Yep.
So I do my best.
Nice. What are you really bad at?
I'm really bad at way more than I'm really good at.
What tops the list?
Communication is probably bad for me. I feel tremendously guilty sometimes that my sport is a very selfish one, and a lot of times I feel like I ignore my friends and family for no reason, just because my emotional energy is very low from putting it all into what I do. And so that's probably the thing that I feel the worst about, just how long it takes me to get back to the people I care about for like literally no reason other than I'm just like
tired.
Yeah, it's like I can't handle this right now. And that's like such a shitty thing for me to do and shitty way for me to think. But like, yeah, it's like I moved away from my friends and family, right? And then I came all the way out here, and now it's like hard for them to get in touch with me.
So how do you sort of compartmentalize that and not let it, get to you?
I don't. Like it gets to me. And sometimes I'm better at it than others about, being proactive about keeping in touch.
Is that seasonal? Does it sort of ebb and flow with how hard you're training?
Yeah, for sure. Like if I'm training super hard, I honestly just don't have the emotional capability to be there for the people that I love in the way that I would want to be. And that's been hard for me to swallow because like I'm selfish with my time, but I also have to be selfish with my energy and my output. And so I'm bad at that, like I'm bad at other things, but that's the thing that I'm bad at that I feel worst about.
Got it. You have a fairly active social media presence. Is your approach to social media intentional? Is it sort of that's who you are and it's easy to do? What's your approach with that? Because it's entertaining from the other side for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, social media is something that I don't totally understand, and I don't think
anybody does.
Yeah, not super comfortable with it, but I do understand its component as part of my job as a professional athlete with some amount of reach and influence. Like I did not have an Instagram before I started running professionally. My Twitter had laid dormant for a long time. Just, I only used it in college to talk about drinking and smoking weed and stuff. And like when
that was the intent in college.
Yeah. Like when I became a professional athlete, I was like, well, I'm going to go
clean this up.
This other stuff. And so anyway, like I feel like I can use it and still express like my true self, I guess. I'm never putting anything up there that I don't think and I don't believe, and I try not to be like a product shill, right? And so I think I can express myself honestly and still use social media. I think that's like a fine line. But I definitely see a lot of social media that I don't like from other people. And I'm just like, okay, this is like what I don't want to be.
Right.
And so I try to be as authentic as possible, but I also know like the dangers of like the comparison game. And so I don't want people to see the shit that I put out and be like, oh,
I must do that.
I feel bad about myself because I'm not doing what Noah's doing.
Right.
And so I like on Twitter, it's mostly just like observations that I have, but like on Instagram, I try to share like a little bit more intimately my process. And like, if I'm struggling, like I'll tell you that to some extent, you know?
I think that's huge. Again, particularly for amateurs, that they see that pros struggle and don't have good races and drop out sometimes and things like that. And I think it moves the sport forward. It's, shitty in the moment, but it moves the sport forward to be able to see that this struggle is shared no matter what level you're at.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily share the nuts and bolts of my training. I mean, it is public. My running log is public out there if you can find it, but I don't think the nuts and bolts of my training are important as much as it is like, hey guys, I felt really bad.
Right.
This injury was really bumming me out, but like, I'm optimistic about the future, yada, yada. So that's the stuff that I'll share and that I hope resonates, and whatever, man, I don't care. Like, it's just like, I really appreciate the support, and I understand the necessity of social media in the world that I live in. And so I just try to use it in a way that doesn't feel icky to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's a tough nut to crack for sure. What do you wish your fans knew about you?
I guess I just, and maybe they do, but I just wish a lot of them knew that my background is pretty different from your average professional athlete. Like, I was a normal person. I had normal jobs.
Yeah.
Like, I did all this other stuff. And so sometimes I meet people and they're kind of wide-eyed and they like look at me like I'm something
like a creature from outer space.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, I can't believe you're like a nice guy or
Right.
like a normal guy or whatever. And I'm just like,
I put my pants on one leg at a time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, not to sound like a dick or anything, but it's just like, yeah, it's like I'm lucky enough that the high end of my fitness allows me to perform on a big stage. But I struggle a lot, with very normal things that I think everyone else struggles with too. And so, I wish people would stop putting us on a pedestal like that and just like appreciate us for humans. And I want people to be able to come up and talk to me like I'm their neighbor, and not some like professional guy with high quality images they see on Instagram.
You'd love the trail scene then.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point. It's always funny when people meet pro athletes and get to that point and like understand that, oh, that's a normal person. Like, for my job, I get to meet a lot of pro athletes and a lot of elite athletes, and I'm often around people meeting the same pro athletes, and the observations are always the same. Like, wow, that person was really cool. It's like, did you think they weren't going to be cool? Like, why? Yeah. Everyone's just a person. Everyone's just a human. And at the end of the day, everybody struggles and everyone has these like characteristics about them that make them unique. And I think that social media allows people to get access to people they wouldn't normally get access to. And some of the feedback I've gotten on this podcast is that people enjoy the like behind the scenes look at what makes an elite athlete tick. And again, the sentiment is like, these are all just normal people with normal people struggles and just doing it faster than other people.
Mm-hmm. Which is, yeah, I guess maybe we should try to appear like superheroes because it's probably kind of boring when they find out that
I'm just start wearing a cape.
I'm just like fucking Joe Schmo or whatever. It's like, why am I even following this guy?
Well, yeah, you might this podcast might actually get you a lot of unfollowers. Yeah, so apologies in advance.
Might as well just go home and shred my contract.
Sorry, brands. So speaking of superheroes and superhuman capabilities, Whose power mustache does yours most resemble? Selleck, Pre, or White Goodman?
Who is White Goodman?
White Goodman is from Dodgeball.
Oh God. My dad always had a mustache, and so like that's where I think I truly got it from. But if I love Pre. I'm totally bought into the mystique of Prefontaine.
All right.
And so like if people see a little bit of that in me, like
that's not bad.
That's an honor. I'll take that.
Cool. While we're on the topic, another submitted question was there any pressure to follow in your dad's footsteps to Franklin College? What was the response of other runners when you tell them, or what is the response of other runners when you tell them you went to a D3 school?
Well, no is the answer to the first question. So my dad was a pretty good high school runner. Went to Franklin College for his freshman year. Franklin College is a small school in Indiana, D3. But he transferred to IU after his sophomore year and stopped running. So he was only there for a year. But he did hold the 8K cross-country school record up until I got to college, which is pretty cool. And I did visit Franklin College, probably a miscommunication, but the coach didn't show up to our meeting. And so I was just like, well,
yeah, probably not.
I got a lot of schools to visit.
Yeah.
Like I'll just cross this one off.
Right.
But, no, my parents have never put any pressure on me to do anything other than pursue the things that are important to me. And so, school choice was my decision. In terms of Division III, like that's definitely a unique path to where I am now. It's cool because other Division III athletes see that and they're like, wow,
I can do it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's really
aspirational.
Cool. Talking to D1 people, they just don't really care.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, cool. Where was that? And they don't really get it. So the D3 community is pretty cool. I actually started my own podcast this year.
Cool.
Focused around D3 running. So it is kind of cool to be, and there's a few of us now, but like one of the D3 guys who like went on to show the world outside of Division III that like, hey, we're still like, we can be good too.
Right. Give the podcast a plug. What's it called?
Yeah. A podcast called D3 Glory Days. And so we interview current or former pros about their Division III careers and how that led them to where they are now.
Cool. How's your experience been with hosting that podcast?
It's been great.
Yeah.
We're 4 in now, and so
you've beaten the average. Most podcasts never make it past 2. So well done.
Yeah, our episode 4 should drop sometime this week. So it's been great, like, and hearing other people and kind of comparing them just in my own head to my own story. Some people have similar trajectories. Some are very different. And some of them are very early in their pro careers or haven't even like truly started it yet. So it'll be fun to watch them.
Cool. What's your guess for the number of questions that Willie Millam submitted?
69.
Nice. The first part of that is correct. The answer was 6.
Oh, okay.
Who is your least favorite teammate? You don't have to answer that.
No, it's got to be Willie.
Fair enough.
100% got to be Willie. Just supporting him through every workout is just a real
just a struggle.
It's a dramatic drain on me, but he's a good guy outside of practice.
Nice. What deodorant do you wear? I'm not sure why he wants to know this, but
to be at the risk of like putting people off, most of the time I don't wear deodorant at all.
So that's why he's asking.
Maybe.
Got it.
I don't know if he knows that about me, but every now and then if I'm going to be like on an airplane or something, I'll sneak in and steal Emma's deodorant. So hopefully she's not listening to this either. But I do not own my own stick of deodorant.
Wow. All right. I was wondering what that smell was. Who is the most attractive runner right now?
Attractive runner?
Yeah. You can thank Willie.
Well, my girlfriend Emma is a runner, an Olympic trials qualifier, and she's smoking hot.
That's a great answer.
So it's got to be her.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Which Always Sunny character do you most identify with?
Probably Charlie. Yeah, probably Charlie.
Nice. What are your thoughts on Fish and why it's the greatest band in the history of the world?
Did Willie submit that question?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't think Willie knows who Fish
Curveball.
is.
His 6th one we won't go with.
I do not have strong feelings on Fish. My mom had like a Fish box set that I used to throw on when I was a kid and just like kind of jam out to it. My mom's kind of an old hippie. But
an old hippie that has Twitter. She replied to one of the questions.
She does have Twitter now, which is insane. She also has an Instagram.
Does she like all your posts?
Yeah, for sure.
Will she listen to the podcast and text you about it afterwards?
I don't know. My parents are not. I haven't really exposed them so much to the podcast world, and so my mom is a loyal NPR listener, and so unless this is like syndicated on NPR,
it's actually live streaming on NPR right now.
Right now, yeah. So she'll probably hear
cool.
it.
Well, hello. What are you scared of?
Oh God, like how dark do you want me to get here?
Go as dark as you want.
Yeah, I guess one thing, at least in my career, that really scares me is never having the opportunity to showcase like how good I think I can be, and that happens all the time. Someone catches an injury,
right.
There's a couple opportunities, you have a bad day, and you never reach that
pinnacle
of your potential. And so that's one thing that scares me, that for factors outside of my own control, I won't achieve what I want to achieve.
Mike Wardian had literally the exact same answer.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah,
it's scary, but that's like the reality of the sport. Another fear I have is just being like left to my own devices. Will I allow relationships that are important to me to fade? Because it's like I talked about earlier, it's a constant struggle with me.
So how do you manage that balance, and how do you, maybe balance is the wrong word, but how do you manage that? Because that's very real for everyone, and that's a struggle for everyone. And an interesting, like I said, I ask a couple of questions repeatedly on this podcast, and the balance one is one that people go either far one way or far the other way. I think it's fascinating to hear just how different everyone is. But how do you manage that?
I think I'm lucky in that the people who are really important to me understand. They're not necessarily runners themselves, but they understand that what I do just takes a tremendous amount of just overall energy. And so they kind of get it. They understand that they may not hear from me for months, and that doesn't make me feel any better.
Right.
It's nice that they get it. And on the other hand, I have friends who are willing to do a lot of the friendship legwork,
right.
Like they're going to pick up the phone. They're going
right.
to text me. They're going to, and especially Emma, my girlfriend, she kind of pressures me and makes me do things that if I was living alone, I just
take a nap,
wouldn't do.
Yeah.
I would just beat myself up
about
it.
What are some of those things?
She'll like calling my parents.
Yeah.
I love my parents so much, and I love talking to them, and I'm always glad I did. But sometimes it's just like, it's hard for whatever reason. I have a block about like picking up the phone and calling. And so she'll be like, hey, you really need to call your dad. Like, you want to,
right.
You need to,
right.
And so do it. And so having that external voice pressuring me to do those things is like really good for me.
How long have you guys been together?
Well, we met at the Houston Half Marathon in January 2 years ago. So we've known each other for 2.5 years. I guess you'd call it 2 years and change.
So she's seen a nice trajectory.
Yeah.
Over a couple of years.
Yeah. She's seen me have a lot of success in my career and also go through periods where I was pretty sure my career was over. Where I just didn't think running was for me anymore. And so she's seen the gamut of that, and so I think when you're we've lived together a long time now. So, you see people across the whole spectrum and you learn how to support them at different places in that spectrum.
Definitely. Fast forward 5 years. What are you doing?
5 years. I hope that I'm lucky enough to continue running professionally for 5 more years. If I were to sign another contract at the end of 2020, which is when mine is up, that would take me until my 34th birthday. And if I could make it that long, I would consider that a huge accomplishment. So I would love to continue running. for one more Olympic cycle. Like that's important to me. That's motivating for me right now. Outside of that, I'm still kind of piecing together what it is exactly that I want to do. I'm an assistant coach at Boulder High School here in cross country. Like coaching is something that
was that like the fittest team in the country?
We're trying to get in there. We definitely have some talented kids for sure. But it's important to me to be a good role model for them and to share some of the things that I've learned. And so I think coaching is intriguing to me. I also like consider myself an athlete's advocate, and I like the business side of the sport, and I see athletes being taken advantage of all the time and they don't even know it.
In what regard?
In terms of contracts and money and just appearances and stuff like that. I'm like, why are you promoting this product for free?
Yep.
Why are you doing this? Like, you don't have to do this. Like, you can pay your rent. So anyway, that's a rant, but I think the sports agency side of it is intriguing to me. I've been lucky to work with a really good agent, Josh Cox, and I think in handling some stuff myself now, I think I can. I think that's something I can share with the running world and make sure that athletes who deserve it are given the opportunity to pursue the life they want without worrying about paying rent. And, Emma is going to be applying to PhD schools. Like, we don't know 100% where that's going to take us yet. So definitely, like, in our roles now, I am absorbing a lot of support. And so I hope that when I no longer require it to the same extent, that I can then turn the tables and support her more in the thing that she's pursuing, and support other people in my life too that I just like have not been given, that I'm not giving their just deserves. And so those are like two career things that I'm thinking about. And then just like in general, like becoming more of the supporter myself instead of the sponge.
Nice. That's aspirational. What are some of your favorite places here in Boulder?
Yeah.
Trails or road or workouts. Are you a Magnolia Road fan?
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of places in Boulder that I see as having a tremendous amount of historical importance. And I love being on Magnolia Road or the dirt roads around Boulder Reservoir and just imagining the people who have used these roads to accomplish incredible things. I was out on one of those dirt roads near the reservoir, and the Japanese team was just running by. Yeah.
And it was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. I mean, international athletes. I mean, people have trained for world records on those roads and gold medals and still active at, like Jenny Simpson will fly by every now and then, like all kinds of stuff. And so I love to be out there pursuing my own goals, but imagining what these roads have done for other people too. And so it's not like this. Yeah, we're in Boulder. The scenery is beautiful. The mountains are cool. Like, we're at altitude. All those factors are nice. But I love just thinking about like the energy that has been poured into like the road.
This training ground.
Yeah, training ground. It's like hallowed ground. Yeah. It's like, I'm a big like, war guy. Like, and like I was a big Civil War buff and stuff. And so, you always think about hallowed ground of like battlefields and like what happened there. Yeah. I think, to maybe a less drastic extent, like you think about what happened on these roads. And that's cool to me.
That makes sense. So the next time you're in or around Boston, you have to go to Battle Road. It's a 7 or 14 mile, if you do it as an out and back, dirt road that has, it's in Lexington and Concord. And it has signs like British soldier buried here, or like this battle happened right here. And it's like, this happened right there. And it's like a rolling history lesson.
Yeah, that's awesome. That combines two of my favorite things.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That's out in Boston. It's a training ground for the Flagstaff or the Boulder of the East.
Yeah.
What are some things that you wish you knew 10 years ago or 5 years ago that you know now, given everything that you've experienced in what's brought you to today?
Let's see, 10 years ago, well, what am I now? I'm 29, 19. Well, maybe 5 years ago, like coming out of college, like maybe I wish I would have made the jump sooner to pursue the thing that I was passionate about.
So take the risk.
Take the risk sooner. I graduated in 2013 and I moved out here at the end of 2015. And in those intervening years, like I was living in Indianapolis and had a good time, and I was hanging out with my friends, but I very much graduated college thinking that running was over and that it was now time for me to like find what I was passionate about and find the next thing, when really
you already found it.
Yeah, I already found it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like eventually I built up the courage, I guess, to like move out here, and it worked out everything has worked out for me. And so it's like I have no complaints, because where I'm at right now is like a better spot than I could have imagined for myself.
Cool.
To be totally honest. And so like if we're like picking straws or whatever the fuck, like maybe I would have moved out here in 2013, but but also maybe it wouldn't have worked out. Maybe the timing wasn't right. And so I'm really happy with where I am now and everything that's happened in my life. Like, it's mostly good and some unfortunate. Like, I'm happy with where I am now.
Cool. I think that's a good place to stop. Thanks so much for joining today, and excited to follow along in Chicago and beyond.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Is a really comfortable couch.
You might never leave.
I don't think so.
Cool. Thanks.
Bye.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.